And I know a fine thing when I see it. See it! For the same reason, no one ever pointed a telescope at the sun. Talking about the Red Angels of NY City.
Okay, tribe, we're back today, and our guest is Miguel Fuentes, third rail of the Guardian Angels. Mr. Fuentes has been a friend of mine for a very long time, a chapter leader here in Chicago in the Guardian Angels chapter that I'm a part of, and he is also the current national director of the organization. I want to go ahead and let third rail introduce himself.
How's it going, Mr. Vargas? First of all, thanks for taking not only the time, but also for spreading the word about the Guardian Angels. As you said, my name is Miguel Fuentes. My code name is Third Rail. I've been a Guardian Angel for 27 years. I actually joined in 1988 in the subways in Chicago, and I was actually recruited by the founder of the organization, Curtis Lewa, on one of his trips to Chicago, and he had just happened to get on the train in the subway on what is now called the CTA Blue Line at the division stop, and he was on his way back to the airport. And as I was riding the train, I had always heard and actually seen Guardian Angels growing up as a kid. I was 15 years old, but prior to that, seeing them on the train, they either were getting off the train or I was getting on the train or they were on the other side of the platform. And in 1988, there was no internet. The Guardian Angels weren't listed in the phone books. So the actual only way to join was if you either saw a recruiting flyer or if you saw them on patrol. So it just happens that the day that the Guardian Angels get on the train, it was Curtis Lewa along with maybe about 12 other members from the chapter in Chicago. And I got up and I asked him, how can I join? He gave me a brochure. And at the time, the brochure had a picture of himself, of Curtis Lewa, because the group was still about 9 years old. And so it was still a national group. It had not become an international organization like it is today. So basically, what ended up happening is as I'm looking at the brochure, I'm like, wait a minute, this guy looks like this guy. So I stood up again and I asked the guy who gave me the brochure, is this you? And he said, yes, it's me. And, I didn't think nothing of it. Maybe I could have got an autograph back then, but what happened is as soon as I got home, I called up and they explained to me the process of joining. They asked me several questions and we set up an appointment and I came down the next day to the very same stop, and from there, I joined the Guardian Angels, and I've been a member for 27 years now.
Now, for those people in the audience who maybe have been living under a rock for the last couple of decades, give me some information about what the Guardian Angels organization is about. What are they? What do they do?
Well, the Guardian Angels is a volunteer, nonprofit organization. Our purpose is to fight crime, but also be a visible crime deterrent. And the way we do that is we wear our trademark red beret and our trademark Guardian Angel white T-shirt, sweatshirt, or red jacket. We go out in groups of 3 or more, and we try to prevent crime, which is why we wear a uniform that says Guardian Angels and the red beret, so that if you're in the process of committing a crime or you're out there and you see a group of Guardian Angels on patrol, whether it's the streets, the trains, or the subways, the buses in different cities across the United States, and also now across the country, across the world, you might think twice about committing a crime because you're going to see, hey, wait a minute, there's a group of people out there that not only will they verbally get involved, so say if we need to defuse the situation, we will, not only by our presence, but sometimes verbally, but we also will get involved physically if we have to make a citizen's arrest, and that's our legal right here in the United States to make a citizen's arrest if we see a serious crime being committed. But again, our main purpose is to be a visible crime deterrent, to be positive role models, and obviously make citizens arrest if we see a serious crime being committed.
Now, who had the idea to start the Guardian Angels, and what was the motivation behind even getting a group like this formed?
Well, in the late 70s, because the group started in 1979 on February 13th, in New York City, in the Bronx, on the 4 train. But prior to that, Curtis was a night manager at McDonald's in the South Bronx, but he lived in Brooklyn. Obviously, majority of the people in New York City, even still to this day, use the trains, the subways to commute all over the 5 boroughs. Well, the 4 boroughs and obviously the Staten Island, you take the ferry there. So during his travels to and from, and we're talking 76, 1977, New York City was, as he calls it, was falling into the abyss. Crime, just the whole city in general was decaying. The police were, after 7 p.m., there was no transit cops. So obviously criminals, gangs at that time in New York City were preying on their passengers. And him as a McDonald's manager would obviously take the train and he would see what was going on. So he came up with this idea, say, wait a minute, we can go out there and fight back and, make citizens arrest. So prior to him starting the Guardian Angels, and while he was working as a McDonald's manager in the South Bronx, he had an organization called the Rock Brigade. Obviously, the name Rock came from Curtis Leewall's code name, Rock, him being solid, always running, nonstop, 24/7, where they would go out there and clean alleys and empty lots of litter, trash, and do the recycling program in the late 70s in New York City. So he figured if he can get people to volunteer to go out there and clean the neighborhoods of the litters, garbage, why couldn't he get people to volunteer to go out there and patrol and fight back and take back the city and obviously the subways from the criminals. So in 1977, 78, he began experimenting with the idea, and on February 13th, 1979, he launched the first subway patrols, and at that time the group was called the Magnificent 13. It was Curtis Leewall and 12 other members, obviously making 13 members. They wore a red beret, but they weren't called Guardian Angels, and they had a white T-shirt. And at that time, since they patrolled the 4 train, which was nicknamed the Muggers Express, they had their T-shirt and their logo was a picture of the 4 train on their T-shirt with clouds underneath, and they were called Magnificent 13. As the group began to grow, from February to September, they had about 80 members. But the general public just thought it was 13 members. So Curtis sat down and brainstormed and said, you know what, if you want to grow, the first thing we need to do is change the name, because people are always going to assume that there's just 13 members, no matter how many members join. So they came up with the name, the Guardian Angels. They kept the red beret. They kept the patrols on the trains, and then later on the streets. And they changed the name and the logo, and it became the Guardian Angels, and that's pretty much how the group started. And it just started exploding and expanding and going to different cities. And in early 1990, it became international.
Now, what was the response of the community to the Guardian Angels when they first
got
out there?
When the group first started in New York City, the community, obviously, and the people who had to ride those trains, for the most part, loved the Guardian Angels. They were out there, they were helping people, but unfortunately, the police and law enforcement and the politicians at the time thought that this has to be a gang. And you have to understand also, when the group started in 1979, the cult movie, The Warriors, had just hit the theaters. So here you have all these New York City street gangs portrayed on the big screen, and you had those gangs in not the same ones, but you had a big gang population in New York City. So the police said, no, this can't be true. And you have to understand that the majority of the members in New York City at the time were black and Hispanic, obviously majority Hispanic or of Puerto Rican descent. So these same police officers who are arresting blacks and Hispanics all day and all night see this group unarmed volunteers going out there and risking their lives to help people, and they just couldn't, they thought it was too good to be true. So the first couple years, the first probably decade, it was testing the waters. It was kind of letting everybody know, proving to not only police departments and the politicians, but to anybody, all the naysayers, of who we are, what our intentions were. So, once in a while now, 2016, we set up different chapters in different parts of the United States or different parts of the world, we sometimes get resistance from the officials, whether it's law enforcement or for the political aspect, and sometimes from the community. But for the most part, now people are actually calling us. Sometimes police officials and public officials and our community are calling the Guardian Angels, and it's more of open arms because of the track record for the last 35, 36 years.
Now, Rail, you've been doing this for decades now, and I want to kind of clarify because there are a lot of people that will go out on a patrol in 1982 and maybe come back in 1994 and go on a second patrol, and then come back in 2016 and go on a third patrol, and they tell people they've been doing this for decades, that they've been Guardian Angels forever. When you say you've been a member for decades, tell us about how many patrols you're going on in a week.
Well, you have to understand, when I started, I was 15 years old. So I was still in high school. You know, now it's 2016. I've been out of high school a long time ago. You know, I have a career, I have a family. Well, I'm probably the Guardian Angel who has the most patrols in the world. At one point, being a full-time Guardian Angel, and what I mean by full-time Guardian Angel, I actually lived at one of the headquarters in Chicago, several of the headquarters over the years, even New York City. So at one point, I was doing this 24/7, 365, 3, 4, 4-hour patrols daily, and lived at the headquarters. But even now, the requirements are to go out on patrol twice a week. Each patrol is 4 hours, and attend the training, which is basically about 10 hours worth of volunteer service a week. I've been doing anywhere from 3 to 4 patrols a week for maybe 24 or 25 years, and then the other years I was a full-time Guardian Angel. So if you wanted to do the math, you can easily say I've done safely over 8,000 patrols, if not more. And these patrols are minimum 4 hours, sometimes lasting 8 or 10 hours. So I've done a minimum of 8,000 patrols. And since 1988 that I joined, I have never stopped. I have never taken a month off. I've never taken a year off. I've never taken 10 years. I never came back to the group. I've been a Guardian Angel since 1988, and I've never stopped patrolling. There are individuals who joined in the 80s and maybe came back, people who joined in the 90s and came back. As far as with the Guardian Angels, unlike with the military or any VFW or any club or stuff like that, we don't count the time that you started, and then it just keeps going until maybe the time you either leave the group, 20 years now. We don't count that. We count the time you're actually active. Because this is what we do is unlike any other organization. We're the only organization in the world that goes out there unarmed to patrol and help people without getting any money. So if you come down into the group and you put in 3-4 months and then you disappear and come back 20 years later, you've only been in the group 3 or 4 months. You've not been in the group for 20 years. And it also takes about 3 months to actually become an official Guardian Angel. There's a training process, obviously, of going on patrol, doing the physical training, self-defense training, but also we need to make sure that you're right for the Guardian Angels and that you can understand there's things that we do and we can't do. First thing, you have to understand that we have to withstand all types of verbal abuse when you get out there. So there's a ton of stuff that you have to go, which is why it takes about 3 months to become an official member.
Now, because you were a full-time Angel in the past, because you've been so incredibly active on patrols, you've seen pretty much everything that there is to be seen as a Guardian Angel. Tell me, just from your personal patrol experience, what are some of the success stories? What are some of the things that you've been involved with that you're proud of?
I mean, I could go on. You could write a book about the success stories, not only in the Guardian Angels, but just myself being with the Guardian Angels and seeing what the Guardian Angels have been able to accomplish in the immediate chapters that I've actually worked with. But I think the one thing that really stands out, the one thing out of my 27 years, is a few years ago here in the city of Chicago. Unfortunately, there was a real violent rape, and it was on the north side of Chicago in the Humboldt Park, in the borderline of the Ukrainian village in Humboldt Park on Western and Augusta, where a lady was waiting for the northbound Western stop early in the morning, say about 4:30, 5 o'clock. This animal came by from behind. Unfortunately, there was a gangway that has been unlocked, dragged the lady from the bus stop, beat her up, sexually assaulted her, robbed her, and obviously just left her there. One of the things the Guardian Angels have been able to do over the decades, especially here in Chicago, is address these issues and help the police, because a lot of times, as people know, there's people out there that want to help the police, that have information, but they don't want the police coming knocking on the door, or they don't want to be seen working or talking to the police because of the neighborhoods they live in. Well, it so happens that we were out there and we were able to get some information from the detectives and actually look at tattoos and pictures of the guys before it was released. The pictures, once we were able to get those pictures and we made a flyer, we began handing out the flyer with this individual's picture on it with information. And again, our flyers consist of information for the people to contact the police, but also to contact the Guardian Angels, because again, many people want to help but do not want to be seen working with the police department, and we understand that, which is why we as Guardian Angels put ourselves in the middle, because the goal is to get criminals off the street and help the police department. Well, it just so happens as we were handing out those flyers, our phone rang, and it was a lady, and she gave us the guy's name, his code name, his address, where he hangs out, all the information we needed. And prior to that, like I said, we had spoke with the police officers and got some information. Well, we also got their phone numbers that were working the case. We called the head of the detective, gave him all the information. She asked me, how did you get this? And I explained to him that somebody in the community whose family member is maybe not on the right side of the law, but that this individual lives in a neighborhood and she takes the bus, and that could have been her, and and that's how she was able to get us exact information on this individual. And so be it. We gave the individual information to the police department. The detectives went in, picked up the guy, and it was the guy. So because the information that came to the Guardian Angels, we were able to get this guy off the street. It's happened in the past, but this case kind of stood out more because it was so detailed. I mean, we could pretty much have walked up to the guy ourselves and apprehended him, but that's not what we do.
Now, the chapter here in Chicago, especially, and other chapters, I think have tried to follow suit. But the old saying is, you teach, you fish and you feed a man, he gets eaten for a day. But if you teach the man to fish, he's going to eat for the rest of his life. The Guardian Angels have always been linked in the public eye with self-defense training and martial arts training. And the Guardian Angels in the Chicago chapter have kind of pioneered the self-defense campaign. Tell me about that. Tell me how that's been working.
Well, over the decades, and just like those, as a matter of fact, where that situation where we spoke about getting the information to get that rapist off the street, we've for many years have done self-defense, obviously, is a weekly thing that we do here in Chicago, and for the last maybe decade plus, for you, Fernand Vargas, have been the main instructor teaching the Raven method and other self-defense methods, but mainly focusing on the Raven method. So you teach the members, but for the last maybe 7-8 years, might even be longer, we've been able to use that self-defense and teach classes. Especially when there's vicious attacks, sexual assaults, robberies, and mainly when it focuses on women and children, because they're the most likely to be victims. So for many years, like I said, maybe even almost a decade now, we've actually taught self-defense to the general public in all parts of Chicago. And basically what we do is when there's a serious attack or a serial attacker going out there and preying on victims, we will open all the classes free to everybody in the affected area, and we would hold it on either on a weekend or in the weeknight so that people can attend after work or after school. And I think at this point we've clearly done over 30 or maybe even 50 different classes and easily have taught over 1,000 citizens from the city of Chicago and actually and other cities self-defense. And so that's something that we started doing many years ago, and other chapters have tried, and it's a good thing because all it takes is someone to try. But we definitely have it all done, the complete package.
Now, Rail, talking about self-defense, Guardian Angels go into, rough areas of the city. They're out in the middle of the night. They go into a lot of the same areas that, police officers will go into, and a lot of the same situations. They don't wear vests. They don't have guns. They don't have tasers. They don't have batons. Handcuffs is about what you carry. The average person would think that that's absolutely nuts. What does it take to prepare a Guardian Angel to be able to go in there and do that kind of work? Tell me about the training. Tell me about when you first started and how the older generation got you ready for that.
Well, you have to understand that, again, before you become an official member, you're going to go through the training process. So part of it is the physical training, self-defense training. The other part is the patrol training, learning the history, and also what to do and what not to do, making citizens arrests, and what we're able to do and what we get involved with. So when we go into these neighborhoods, whether it's on the train or we get off the train or we just happen to patrol these areas, we not only have a reputation, obviously, but people in the neighborhood can relate to us. They see us. They see we carry no weapons. They see we carry no bulletproof vests. We're approachable. We won't hesitate if something happens to get involved. We're not intimidated. And at the same time, we go out there not looking for trouble, but again, we're trying to prevent a deterrent, which is why we wear the red beret and t-shirt. So we're not like just, hey, let's get off the train in this area and let's see if we can get into a scuffle. That's not what it's about, because that doesn't help anybody. We patrol the area and we do a lot of escorts. Sometimes we get off in rough areas on the train and people get off, and especially late at night, a lady or even young kids, when they're out late, they want to escort maybe, or they want us to wait for them until the bus after they come off the train. So it's a combination of many things. It's a combination of how we've been trained in the self-defense. And again, the martial arts was a big part of the Guardian Angels in the early 80s, especially in New York City. But here in the city of Chicago, it's been about the self-defense, because the martial arts is great. It's great. But unfortunately, for you to get good, it takes many, many, many years of discipline to get good at it. With the self-defense, it's something that you can pick up right away and you can actually use right away, as opposed to practicing the same form, stance, and technique for 10 years. The self-defense that we teach is realistic. It's what's going to actually happen in a street fight. The martial arts is great, but unfortunately, when you're out on the street, people aren't throwing correct punches, and if they're throwing kicks, most people don't know how to throw a correct kick. So you're not going to get your side kick, roundhouse kick. You might get a front kick, but that's about it. Everything's usually haymakers, sucker punches. People are using all types of weapons, bats, chains, pipes, knives, guns. So the self-defense that we've been using and working with here in Chicago has been instrumental, because it's a real life scenario. It's what you're gonna actually see when you get out on the streets or the trains.
Now, tell me about the old days. Some of the training stories from the old days are pretty famous within the circles. It wasn't easy training. It wasn't traditional dojo training. I hear things like the Apache line. That's a famous one. Tell us about the Apache line, because I think that'll give people some insight as far as to, how you guys prepared back then.
Well, actually, back in the early '80s and stuff, in order to graduate, you had to go through what we call an Apache line or the circle of death, whereas pretty much you were put in the middle, and 5 or 6 guys or girls were going to hit you. They were going to hit you, and they weren't going to hold back. They were not going to hit you in the face or not going to hit you in the groin, but they were going to hit you, and they were going to kick you. You could not fight back. And the reason for that is because when you're out on the street, especially when you're out on a train, if you're on not so much a patrol, but if you're on the train itself, say there's 4 or 5 guardian angels and there's 8 or 10 cars, depending on what city you're patrolling in, you're going to be in one train car by yourself. And then there's going to be, and there has been for decades since we started, situations where you're going to be confronted by several individuals, and they're not going to hold back. So the purpose of the training was to see if you could hang, and if you were able to absorb the punishment, because people have to realize when you're out in the street, regardless of who you are or how good your martial arts or your self-defense is, you will get hit. If Bruce Lee got hit, everybody gets hit. So you will get hit. The difference between what we train with and over the years, especially now, is your next reaction. You're going to get hit. You're going to get kicked. You're going to get kneed. Something's going to go flying, a bottle, a book, a bat. Someone's going to throw something at you, a can, a rock, etc., etc. It's how you react once you're hit, once you're kicked, once you're punched, how you're going to react. And so that's what we wanted to do in the earlier stages, the first decade plus of the Guardian Angels, to see if you were able to withstand that, because many people actually quit after a training. They could not take it. And there's people that actually, when they saw other people going through the Apache line, they said, nah, this is not for me. And they would actually walk out. It's like, I can't do this. And then the Guardian Angels, the volunteer organization, it's not for everybody. But we'd rather have somebody walk out during training than go out in the street and something happens and walk out on you there. Because now you're like one less member. And you have to understand, when you see Guardian Angels running away, then what's going to happen to the other Guardian Angels? They're going to be like, oh, wait, let's start running. Or whoever you're going toe-to-toe with, whether it's criminals, gangbangers, drug dealers, they're going to be like, oh, man, these guys are easy. So it's just going to motivate them. So it's part of the training that we had to go through. Because remember, the first decade plus, we were not only introducing ourselves to the community, to the politicians, and the police, but also to the criminal element. And it was sort of like we were being baptized and being tested at the same time.
Now, Rail, there's an old movie with Vin Diesel where he plays kind of a mob guy, and he's the muscle of this group of guys. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he had a good, it was a good scene where he's going to get into a fight with a guy, and he tells the guy that when he was growing up, he was trying to figure out how he would know when he was a tough guy. And he kind of put the number at like 500 street fights. He said, the 500 street fights, that's when I'll know I'm proficient, when I'm good. You've been in about 500 altercations as a Guardian Angel. I'm probably going to, maybe even more, but you've been in at least 500 knockdown, drag out, scuffles with gangbangers, drug dealers. As far as
Criminals.
I know, criminals, yeah. As far as I know, you don't have a black belt. You've never earned a black belt in like karate or some other martial art. But I think that there's very few people that have ever been in that many street altercations that have that kind of insight to real modern street violence. From that experience, give me 1 or 2 things that you felt were the most important things that you would share with somebody else if they had to prepare for that violence.
Well, you're right. I've actually never stepped into an actual dojo growing up, or even as I got older. I joined the Guardian Angels when I was 15, and one of the reasons also for becoming the Guardian Angels, because I knew, and I seen that they knew martial arts, and I wanted to learn how to defend myself. I was young, I was in high school, And so not only helping people, but also, being able to defend myself. And I learned real quick, and I, over the decades, learned from all the instructors. Anybody who was in the organization, who was teaching a class, whether it's from Chicago or when I started traveling to other cities, other states, I picked up as much knowledge, and I implemented and then I used what I could. The fancy kicks and punches are nice, but those only really work in the movie. And so as the decades have, gone, and I've been Guardian Angel 27 years, I've had many, many encounters with people, and the one thing that I would like to share, and I think the thing that's most important, is that you have to understand that, like I said earlier, everybody gets hit, but it's what you do after you get hit. Do you ball up? Do you run away? Or do you understand that this is part of whatever it is, whether you're trying to make a citizen's arrest or you're going home on your own and you're being attacked and you're now the victim of a crime or of a robbery, or maybe someone might mistake you for somebody else or rival gang member or something else, because you have to understand there's people who live in different parts of the world, especially here in the city of Chicago, gang-infested neighborhoods. So people might just come up to you and say, hey, you're so-and-so. I'm like, I'm not. And they start attacking you. The main thing that I've learned is that you cannot give up. You cannot stop, no matter what happens. Yes, you're going to get hurt. Yes, you're going to get hit. Yes, you might bleed. And yes, you might get cut. But you cannot stop. And once you cannot stop mentally, the physical part's easy. Because if in your brain and the inside of you is telling you, and you're telling yourself, no matter what happens, no matter how bad I might get jumped or beat up or even robbed, no matter what happens, I'm going to keep fighting. So that's the most important thing. A lot of times you might have the prettiest form and technique and been studying for years, but if you can't apply that into the street, because it's different in the dojo and it's different in the mirror than on the street. So the main thing is if you can apply what you know, regardless of what skill level you're at, to the streets, that is more important than in the dojo. In the dojo, there's referees, there's people saying, now may stop, whatever they're using. But in the streets, nobody's saying stop. But at the same time, being out in the streets and being able to defend yourself and knowing that you're able to be a good fighter should also be an indication that you shouldn't go out there looking for fights either.
Great. Well, Rail, thank you very much for being on here with us. We hope to get you back on sometime soon. There's a lot of topics, especially related to, the swell of crime, not only in our city, but around the country. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about that at another time. But again, thank you for being on today. Really appreciate it. Now, before we go, if anybody's interested in becoming a Guardian Angel or interested in supporting the group, either making a donation or offering time, on the back end, not going out on patrol, how can people get a hold of you and the organization?
Well, if you want to help out in other ways besides patrol, you can always contact our webpage, the Guardian Angels, via the internet. Go to our website, guardianangels.org, and just go into the contact section and just leave your information. There's also links and buttons there where you can press and make a donation via PayPal, etc., credit card. You can do that. If this is for anybody who hears this or reads this, anybody across the world can go to our website, guardianangels.org. If you want to join in the city of Chicago, feel free to call us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 312-217-7245. And if you need to follow us on the social media sites that we have, for parts of it, you can go to the Facebook page and just look for Guardian Angel Safety Patrol, or the two Twitter pages, which are pretty easy to look at, is twitter.com/GA United States, or the other one, which is twitter.com/Chicago Chapter. So obviously Chicago Chapter would be for Chicago. GA United States would be for the rest of the group. And then you can leave information on any of the social media links. We have a YouTube page that is very, very active, and we have about 300 videos on there, and that's youtube.com/thirdrail1988, which is obviously my name and the year I joined. Or you can just type in, when you go to YouTube, Guardian Angel Patrol, and you'll start seeing our videos pop up.
Great, Rail. Well, thank you again, and hopefully we'll be having you back on real soon. Take care.
All right, thank you.